the next song is a song that I wrote for the second album, the My Universe album, and it was a song that was like super personal to me. And we'd gone out to Nashville at the time. I think maybe we'd flown into Nashville for a couple of days. We were out on tour with Little Big Town at the time, and we flew over to Nashville, had a few writing sessions out there, and I went into the room with three other writers at the time, and uh, we decided it wasn't actually my idea initially. It was Livy Jean who was in the session with us, and she said, "I'd love to write a song about my dad." And I remember when she suggested that, I just had this like lump in my throat and thinking, I don't know how, because at the time I hadn't really spoken about my dad. It was something, my dad had passed away when I was just a little girl. And, my family and I, we never really kind of brought up his name and stuff. So it was really quite like a hard kind of session for me to try and get some of those feelings and emotions out. But at the same time, it was so like kind of cathartic that we were sharing those same things that we loved about our dads. It was Livy Jean and Victoria Banks, both daddy's little girls, and we were all sharing our stories. And Jeff Combs was in the session with us as well. And it was just so wonderful to kind of get some of our feelings and emotions out. And I love the line. It was, used to wrap my hand around his little finger, and it turns out he was wrapped around mine. And I remember that Victoria had that line. Just she was like, "1 second, I've got something like kind of for this song." And I remember her kind of going through her notebook at the time and saying, and just like reading that line out, and all of us were like, "Phew, how have you just kept that in your notebook for this long?" Like, absolutely love that line, and it really made that song. The wonderful thing actually in particular is that this song, the two girls in the session with me, their dads were still here with them. My dad had passed away, and yet the song still kind of stood on its own, whether your dad was still with you or whether he had passed away. And it worked for kind of the both sides, which was pretty cool that it kind of worked out like that. But then also going to take it to the stage and performing it night after night, which was hard in itself to get up on stage and like kind of pour your heart out and tell people about a really personal story. The amount of people that kind of came forward and said how much that song means to them and how they can relate to the same thing, and so many girls saying that's exactly my relationship with my dad. And the wonderful song stories that kind of came out of such a personal story for myself, and also the dads that came forward. I was not expecting that. I wrote it from the perspective of a daughter, and never even thought about all those dads thinking of their own little girl. And yeah, and how much comfort that song has brought to them as well.
And I think that's the thing that you did so well in this song. Is we're always trying to write something that's kind of specific to you.
Yes.
I think that and that becomes universal, and it's I think I've done it before. I've tried to write a song that everyone can sing along, everyone can relate to.
Hmm.
When you try to make something universal, it ends up being smaller in a weird way. If you just sat there going like, oh, we're all happy people, it can work sometimes,
Yes, it
but
can.
it often doesn't. Whereas with this song, you just wrote something so personal,
Mm.
and I think everyone finds their story, their way to relate to it. And I think
Hmm.
it's just such a beautiful song, and it's fascinating also that we didn't know this, but I also wrote a song about my dad
Yeah.
at the same time. And on the album, they
Hmm.
sit next to each other. And
Well,
um,
that's the funny thing is because, usually when we write songs, a lot of our songs are from either a male female perspective, or it's kind of
like neutral,
universal.
yeah,
Yeah, so anybody could be singing it. And this was the first time like the both of us had actually written really personal songs that wouldn't have worked necessarily with the other one sung it as
yeah,
such, because it wasn't their personal story. So that was kind of an interesting concept. But the fact that you had written a song about your dad at the same
mm,
time, because you found out that you were going to become a dad
gonna become a
yourself.
dad.
Yeah.
Gosh, yeah. So it's just amazing how this
But
journey.
also, it's weird because we spend a whole lot of time together, and a lot of the time we think we know what each other's thinking, and it's sometimes a bit weird because we do. You'll sit there and I'm like, I know what he's
But
thinking,
also
or I know
people,
when she's going to
yeah.
sing that line or something like that, and it's strange.
Well, people also assume we are together, like romantically.
Ew.
And I remember people saying like, "Oh, Chris, you look great for someone who's just had a baby," and it was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, someone else."
It's not me, thanks.
I love this song. It's such a beautiful song.
The smell of Old Spice, flat cap on the dash, windows roll down in the rain, white lines flying past, singing along with the radio, a little out of tune. Hanging on to that steering wheel was the man who hung the moon. Used to wrap my hands around his little finger. Turns out he was wrapped around mine. He said, you can be anything you want to in this great big world, but I'm always gonna be Daddy's little girl. He always used to tell me, don't grow up too fast. Love will come, love will go. Your first won't be your last. I didn't always listen when he gave me advice. Now I hate to admit it, but that man was always right. Used to wrap my hands around his little finger. Turns out he was wrapped around mine. He said, you can be anything you want to in this great big world, but I'm always gonna be Daddy's little girl. Daddy's little girl. When I count my blessings, I know where to start. He might not hold my hand no more, but he'll always, always hold my heart. Used to wrap my hands around his little finger. Turns out he was wrapped around mine. He said, you can be anything you want to in this great big world, but I'm always gonna be. Yes, I'm always gonna be Daddy's little girl. Daddy's little girl. Do you know, the line I love in that song also is the hand. He might not hold my hand no more,
Yeah.
but he'll always hold my heart. And I love that kind of can signify either that they're not here. You know, he is not here for me. He's not here anymore. Or perhaps, you know, you're a grown adult now and he's not necessarily holding your hand to walk you down the street and stuff. And I just love that kind of two meaning for that sort of words. I love that.
Man, do you know what? And I think people hang on every single word when you sing that. You know, we
Mm.
played, you know, these quite big stages, and you can just hear a pin drop. You
It's
know, literally.
crazy how quiet it is in that song, isn't it? It's,
Definitely.
you know, and I tend not to look at the crowd because there's usually somebody's got a tear in their eye, and if somebody's going, I'm most likely going to go myself. So
I've seen people like breaking down in the crowd. I've seen them just like dabbing, and then they're like just gushing. You know, it's
I think there's been some like grown men that have said, I think there was like some dust in the air because like my eyes were watering for some reason. But yeah.